Section 21.3, Continental Drift. So if you look at a map of the world and you look kind of close, you'll notice that the eastern side of South America and the western side of Africa seem to kind of fit together. And in the early 1900s, a man named Alfred Wegener noticed exactly that. He noticed that these two continents seemed to kind of fit. And from that proposed the idea of what's known as continental drift, that the continents were once part of this giant supercontinent, and over time they drifted apart. So in the process, he also proposed that continents didn't necessarily end at their shoreline. They didn't end where the land met the water. Instead, they ended at a region known as the continental shelf, which is the place where the continental crust ends. Some of the continental crust will run underneath the water, and when that continental crust ends, that's the end of the continent. If you take that into account, South America and Africa fit together almost perfectly. And so Wegener used that along with a bunch of other evidence that pointed to this idea of continental drift. If you look at rocks in South America and Africa, they're both of similar age, they're both of similar type. So they both were formed at a similar time. If you look at mountain chains on the two continents, when you line up the two continents, the mountain chains seem to match up. If you look at fossils, you find that millions of years ago, the same animals lived on the South American continent as did on the African continent, which only makes sense if those two lands were close enough for animals to walk between them. And then finally, if you look at ancient continental ice, you see that this ice matches between the two continents. So Wegener had all of this information, but that information did him no good. He proposed this idea of Pangaea, this idea that all of the continents were once one giant supercontinent. And you can see here in the picture, if you include the continental shelves, these things fit together really, really well. And so Wegener had this idea and he had all this evidence for it, but no one believed him and no one would accept it because he had no way to explain why. He knew or understood that this had to have happened, but he didn't get how it could have happened. And that was the most important thing that he was missing. There is a how, and that's what we'll talk about in the next section.